You gonna give me a thumbs up when we're good, or okay, we're good. All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. For those who came to watch this Q&A in person, and for all those who are watching at home, we appreciate your attendance. We appreciate your participation in this process. We come today to the close of our finalist interviews today. I have with me today Dr. Natalyn Gibbs, who I'll ask the same questions I've asked of previous candidates as well. I want to remind folks, or for those who are not aware, that we have QR codes available here on screen. They're also available on the YouTube video. It'll go directly to Dr. Gibbs' survey, and that survey is open until 9 a.m. tomorrow. The board will receive the results of that survey and all surveys and use that to help make our decision. I want to recognize my colleagues from the school board. If you're here, please raise your hand or stand up as we give recognition. If you have want to say a few words towards the end of the meeting, I'm sure they'll be happy to hear. At the end of the meeting as well, if you have any questions about this process, about how the school board has conducted this 6-month process, I'm happy to answer those questions as well. Welcome, Dr. Gibbs. Thank you for your time and for your interest in serving in this very important role for our district. I want to give you a chance to provide us with any opening remarks and to tell us a little bit about who you are.
Sure. Greetings. Thanks for tuning in this evening. I'm Dr. Natalyn Gibbs, and it is an honor to share my leadership journey with you. I've spent the last 2 decades serving in urban education. I've had the opportunity to serve at multiple levels, starting with classroom teacher, assistant principal, executive director of operations, and executive director of schools. And what I can tell you is my work is always in service to students, ensuring that they are on a guaranteed pathway to success, making them college, career, and life ready.
The series of questions that I have were submitted through community surveys. We had about 122 submissions. They come from parents, they come from teachers, they come from community members as well. This very first question for you, Dr. Gibbs, comes from a parent, and it is, why do you want to be the superintendent of Erie's Public Schools?
Thank you for that question. From a reflection standpoint, I believe I'm at a place where I just need a change. Obviously, when you think about the announcement through AASA, I was intrigued by EPS for 2 reasons. One, because of the urban district, but also based on the diverse population. And so, of course, I think being a good steward, you're going to continue to further research. And so it led me to want to know more about Erie's Public Schools. And so what I was most impressed by were the smart and innovative investments, the state and national recognition around turnaround. Let me say that over. Most impressed by the smart and innovative investments on school models. Wraparound supports are really important to me. I think that's the foundation for the unique students that are being served here in Erie. Also, I noticed the state and national recognitions, the turnaround efforts, and for anyone who has been a part of those in those spaces, it's hard to do. In addition to that, I was most impressed by the commitment to equity, as well as the district school pride. And so definitely want to shout out to some of the Erie's high schools. Got a chance to go to the basketball game on Tuesday night, and when I talk about school pride, it was a packed house. And so it was a testament of the cheerleaders, the basketball team, the students just interacting with one another. I was very impressed with the coach, the temperament that he and his team used, specifically when giving very pointed feedback to the students. You know, everybody needs feedback. So it's one, two, three, huh? And so they went on. So I was very impressed by that. But more importantly, the resilience that you all have had to overcome many challenges. And so that's part of it. I think the other part is as my research continued, I've been able to meet with various stakeholders so that I am informed. Safety and security is top of mind for me, as I'm sure it is for many of you all. And so, given the world that we live in, it is critically important to have a plan day one, or being able to, you will never have a full proof plan, but you'll have a plan where you can be able to act upon it. And so, was able to meet with the community liaison, Mr. Darrell Craig. Shout out to him for just being gracious and granting me his time. But he was able to talk about the initiatives in keeping students safe in and outside of school. Also met with the chief of police, very impressed by his discussions around the initiatives, but more importantly around thinking about the community relations. We know that you can't just police, but there has to be some relationships established because it does impact the entire family unit. Um, and then having an opportunity to meet with CEO and President Brendan Mendoza of the Chamber of Commerce. And I believe that when you think about strong schools and economic development, the school and the city work hand in hand. And so all of those key stakeholders, in my opinion, being able to have some insight, it really helped me to inform my decision. All in all, the folks in this city are just very kind, have been very accommodating, and for me, it solidified 5,000% that I'm a perfect match for EPS.
This next question comes from a teacher. Dr. Gibbs, how do you plan to continue the positive improvements that have been made within the district over the past few years?
Sure. Thank you for that question. I think it's collective efficacy. You can't. This is a team effort. The team has to work together around common goals. Phil Jackson says, "Good teams become great ones when we learn to surrender the me for the we." We can do this together. And so it is really important to me to honor the work that has already been done prior to and building on those successes. I also believe it's important to celebrate the quick wins. Sometimes we don't tell our story enough. And so if you don't tell your story, someone else will. So being able to control the narrative in a way that we deserve. I have done a lot of research, and what I can tell you is this district is doing some phenomenal work. And so we have to tell our story better. I also think school leadership visibility. So hashtag BET Tour, that's building excellence together. For me, it's about listening, it's learning, and it's leading. It's also connected to collaboration, communication, connection, as well as community. When community is valued, voices are heard, and every student is known if done correctly. I also think it's important for us to leverage the strengths of the team. This is where we got to tap into our talents. So thinking about educators serving on committees, educators are the ones who will be facilitating professional learning. We would be developing or leading or expanding our pipeline, so essentially growing our own. I think it's about taking action on the listen and learn sessions. Sometimes we listen, we learn, but we stop there. So it's the full circle moment. But also it's about a deeper dive around what the data is telling us around the key metrics. Also looking at some of the root causes and identifying what's causing us to stay stagnant. How can we put some stopgap measures in place? I think it's critically important for us to double down on continuous improvement efforts. Um, we got to get a good return on investment. Um, I believe focusing on the whole child. Um, you have to do academics as well as social and emotional learning, given that we have such a unique population of students. Um, and then removing any and all barriers uh, as it as it pertains to students, but also addressing the mental well-being. We know that we live in a world now that mental well-being is a real thing, and it's important for us to prioritize that not just for students but also for adults. And then removing all barriers so that schools are safe, more reliable, and predictable places to learn as well as to grow.
Thank you for that. This next question comes from a student. Dr. Gibbs, how will you build relations with the youth and students of Erie's Public Schools?
Yes, thank you for that question. When being a champion for children, I think it's around advocacy. The late Rita Pearson reminds us that every child deserves a champion, one who believes, one who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists they become the very best that they can possibly be. This is about hard work. It's more than a strategy or a vision. It's about building authentic and meaningful relationships and certainly prioritizing students. I don't take this work lightly. I get to serve and lead, and it's through action, not promises. Um, I think being able to be visible on school visits, interacting with students, had an opportunity to interact with many of the students today. And it was really interesting to see their faces when I, called them by name. And again, I think every student has to be known. Every student has a story, and we have to make sure that we support and value them in that way. Also, I think just showing up and supporting them by way of games, concerts, musicals, and that's at the local, state, as well as national level. It also consists of student forums, advisory groups, cabinet representation. I would certainly want students to be part of my cabinet so that they can share not only their perspectives but also solutions. Um, Having an open door policy is very important to me. I work for the people. There's no hierarchy here, and so definitely want to make sure that I'm accessible to not just students but to everyone. Um, and then we can't do this work without partnering with parents. Parents are children's first teachers, and so it's important to make sure that we are um, intentional in our outreach efforts in informing in various ways to make sure that parents can access. We got to make it make sense. And ultimately, the goal is to ensure, again, as I opened up, that every student is on a guaranteed pathway to success so that they have an opportunity to be college, career, and life ready. It also goes back to if we do this and we do this the right way, um, we're able to work on student belonging. I hear that often. Students don't feel like they belong. Um, it elevates student voices. It helps with student to student relationships, which we know that sometimes in the classrooms that can be problematic. Sometimes students can be dysregulated. Um, Student to teacher relationships, and then also academic press.
This next question comes from a variety of stakeholders. Dr. Gibbs, how do you engage stakeholders in your decision-making process?
Thank you for that question. Being transparent and having open communication. I think information is power. So just doing some very simple things, being proactive in sharing and updating around the focused outcomes, proposed plans, the rationale on specific decisions that have been made. Um, Inclusive representation, meaning I want to hear from all stakeholders. All voices matter, including those that are sometimes underrepresented. Um, when thinking about um, our multilingual students and families, having translators so that we can create accessibility, um, so that all families can assess, working with all stakeholders, not only in identifying challenges, but also brainstorming solutions. Um, I think it goes further in using various platforms for soliciting input. We need to hear from you. That's very important. Um, Sometimes we say that we want to hear, and then when you receive the feedback, you often don't. You wonder where is it going, and so creating safe places for us to be able to have honest, open and honest dialogue, which is key. Actively listening and understanding around in different perspectives, even if they differ from my own views. Um, it's consensus building, um, solutions that work for the majority, not the minority. Um, and then, of course, I think it's the ongoing input on the cycles where there are clear feedback loops. One protocol that I've used in the past is you said, we heard, we did. It's something very simple, but it's just another way to make sure that everyone receives the same information.
This question comes from a non parent community member. Dr. Gibbs, how have your past and current experiences prepared you to lead a district like Erie?
Thank you for that question. I would say 2 years, two decades of the intricacies of urban schools. Um, Certainly have been a champion for students, for teachers, as well as for families. I'm a solutions oriented leader. I'm focused on building trust, but also positive relationships. Um, my decisions are centered around students. They are my key focus. I would also say just the coaching and developing of executive principles with various models, such as Intel IB, Montessori dual language, technology design, um, the Aspiring Principal program in supporting and building a pipeline of leaders in making who are courageous in taking the next step to the principalship. I think it's about strategic investments, reducing the variability so that all teachers are coached with the right feedback and supports to improve educators' practice, effective instruction, as well as outcomes. And then I would also include just a few other things. This is really about having a universal walkthrough tools so that we could kind of getting into the structures of around impacting achievements. And so all of the things that I've just shared with you, we've done those things. We've met all academic indicators across content areas, being a level 5 district, which means it's the highest designation. We've done that 3 years in a row. So a three-peat, and we're going for a four-peat like Kansas City. Um, Definitely have increased the graduation rate by 4.5%, which is historic. There is intentionality around that. And so when I think about the graduation rate here in Erie being at 72%, certainly want to make sure that we leverage all of our strategies. And then I would say from an operations standpoint, just operations, facilities, budget, partnerships, universal partnerships that tap into dual credits, the workforce development, and then I think at the very least, just having a belief that all students deserve a champion so that they can reach their full potential, for sure.
Another question from a teacher. Dr. Gibbs, please describe your experience with increasing test scores.
Sure. Um, I think that that comes at multiple levels. I think in the very beginning, I stated that had an opportunity to serve at all levels. As a classroom teacher, taught and tested grades. Um, was a great teacher, had great results, not just from an academic standpoint, but I think it was always rooted in relationships, getting kids to be able to do things that ordinarily they wouldn't do. But when there is um, a relationship and an expectation that kids can do what you expect for them to do, I think if the right learning conditions are set, they will do it. They will rise to the occasion, but we have to set the bar. So that has certainly been my experience. As an executive principal, I'm known to be a turnaround leader. As a principal for 7 years, I was able to increase my test results anywhere from 3 to 34 percentage points across content areas. Being a reward school for 3 years across the 7 year span. Of course, as I noted, um, exiting schools from the priority list, which are in the bottom 10%. Um, and some of the shifts that I mentioned earlier in terms of the level 5 designation, I think that this is huge. That's a huge honor because that speaks to the work of the entire team across the board. And then I would say just being featured in Southern states for leading the way post COVID, specifically in ELA as well as math as a district level.
This question comes from a parent. In what ways would you help to improve the public's image of Erie's Public Schools?
All right. Well, thank you for that question. I would start out by saying that EPS has certainly done a phenomenal job of leveraging various social media platforms. However, as we continue to share our journey through the Building Excellence Together, that's hashtag BET Tour. I think together we can start with that as a district leadership team. Um, as we spend time in the athletic events, the performances, the musicals, I think there's an opportunity to create this energy. It can be infectious, but we have to tell our story. We're reinforcing that presence about kids and about the work that is happening um, from teachers to students to families and in the broader community. There are so many opportunities to shine the light on the great work that is happening here, but again, we have to tell our story, and I think just continuing to be allies with the media and just telling the story in ways where it's beyond social media. It's providing also select group of students an opportunity to serve as ambassadors. It's also letting them share their journey, experience their perspectives and their guidance through all the clubs and the activities that they participate in. So again, it's the firsthand experiences, amplified voices, but nothing that's new. It's just being very intentional and deliberate around how we tell their stories so that we can validate and elevate the voices and the work that is happening here in the district.
This question comes from a variety of stakeholders. Dr. Gibbs, how do you plan to foster strong relationships and morale with administrators, teachers, and staff to ensure open communication and shared decision making?
That's a great question. I'm going to start out by saying people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so I think staff showing up as the best version that they have to give so that students can thrive is critically important. So this only happens when people feel good about where they work and how they feel. And I do understand that that can be an ebb and flow. Um, Staff satisfaction and working conditions will be considered. It will be a priority. School leadership visibility, just again, listening, learning, leading, having venues and opportunities for voices to be shared, perspectives to be heard, um, folks to be able to serve on various committees so that we can have a 360 perspective. Um, I also think it has to do with benchmarking pay and being competitive with pay packages, growing your own in terms of the program, specifically around some of our support staffs where we have job embedded programs. And then I think it's just the apprenticeships, um, and then working with the teachers union, teacher as well as the administrative unions around some of the things that sometimes can bubble up that doesn't have to be an issue, but I certainly think that they have to be addressed, or they will become a bigger issue over a course of time. As we know, specifically, one of the hottest topics with teacher unions is classroom discipline. But again, through those collaborative conversations weekly, I think that's just one of many areas that we can talk about, but we have to be solutions oriented around how do we address it, getting to the root cause. But it has to be addressed. And then, of course, I would say through those collaborative conversations with the teachers union, um, there are opportunities for growth, but we're also looking for solutions. So for every problem we have, we need to have three solutions to be able to counteract it.
Another question from a variety of stakeholders. What role does teacher voice and expertise play in your decision-making process as it relates to the academic and social-emotional group of the students at Erie's Public Schools?
I first want to say I want to give a round of applause to all the teachers in the room and a standing ovation. Thank you, teachers, for all that you do in service of students. Um, the work that you do is a thankless job sometimes, um, but I'm encouraged by you, the strength, the resilience that you have, and I just appreciate you showing up every day in your very best version for students. I would also say that we have to have systems for teachers' voices to be elevated, and action to be taken. Um, Having meaningful representation on committees. Again, I think I've said this a couple of different times, but I also think it's critically important to have teachers represented on the cabinet for perspective. Those leadership opportunities to being able to lead or being empowered to lead, I think, again, can be very influential throughout those buildings. Establishing systems for regular and transparent channels to share ideas, concerns, and or feedback, for sure. And then, of course, I think in terms of social and emotional learning, this is the part where, we already have those systems in place. We have it designed, I think, making sure that time is carved out so that um, attention can be given to that. I think, with relationships and then being able to work around those competencies, um, while it seems small, I think it's huge when you think about the unique population that we serve, specifically when kids come to school with trauma. So it's critical to the work, the day-to-day work.
This next question comes from a non-parent community member. Dr. Gibbs, when you share an example, can you share an example of when you led a system level change in your district that resulted in positive outcomes?
Sure. Um, a new curriculum um, in ELA, structured, not scripted. I'll let that sit with you for a moment. Any of you in that same situation? Yes. And so 2 years later, a math curriculum. Um, I do understand that it's hard to implement those things, but sometimes it is necessary. And so we were able to implement or shift with an ELA curriculum and then as well as a math curriculum. And so not just receiving the curriculums, but we understand that it does come with growing pains. However, there is intentionality around the built-in supports, ensuring that the instructional delivery and implementation with fidelity is happening daily. All teachers are coached, developed, and provided feedback. We have coaching cycles um, that are leveraged, and we're able to make sure that we're using all of the appropriate tools to reduce the variability across schools. And then, of course, I think just you can't have a curriculum without having a series of professional learning. These, of course, it's ongoing, and so um, you can't do it by yourself. And so thinking about how to leverage the instructional leadership teams, those networks, they're trained as well so that um, school teams can come back and do a train to trainer model.
This question comes from a parent. What is your vision for special education in the district, and how do you plan to improve services for students with disabilities?
Thank you for that question. When I think about students with disabilities here at EPS, approximately 22.5% of students are represented. Students with disabilities have a special place in my heart, but at the very least, all students deserve access. So I expect for students with disabilities to receive a continuum of supports. I expect for a strong service model to be in place, preferably a co-teaching model versus a pull-out. I think we have to, it's critically important to make data-based decisions. IEPs are instructionally written, instructionally appropriate, and it's not just a compliance piece, but it's a way to really move the needle around those present levels of performance for students. Um, I think it's important that students are in the least restrictive environment. I think when they are with their peers, they have an opportunity to engage, have discourse, and learn from one another. And then thinking about those expanded related services, ensuring that they are integrated into student schedules, very similar where they're not being pulled out. And I think I mentioned this earlier. Again, we can't do this work without parents. So we're going to continue to partner with parents as they can be informed. They got to make it make sense. They can't reinforce anything that they don't understand. So sometimes it does mean that we have to take some extra steps, do some things a little differently. But I think it's important to do that so that we can make sure the students are okay, especially students with disabilities. And then I also believe that because there are so many layers to the different diagnoses, it sometimes requires ongoing professional learning that is required around either the academics or the behavior techniques. Those things are pretty simple to me. And then I think we just continue to support, but all in all, I believe that Um, Students with disabilities have the same right and should have access just like any other student.
This question comes from a non-parent community member. Dr. Gibbs, can you share an example of how you have leveraged community partners and or local businesses to improve your school district?
Sure, sure. I think community partnerships are the bedrock of the community. Um, I'm just going to just start listing many things because all of these things are things that we've probably already done together, but from food pantry to clothing closet, um, offering parents household items for daily supplies, um, being able to receive washers and dryers for different schools for those littles that sometimes have accidents, and parents just aren't able to stop in the moment and drop off items. I've also been able to leverage jobs from different companies for our parents, as we understand that sometimes it's not always easy for our underserved population. Um, Celebration of schools and Parent University. This is a district-wide, city-wide, where who's who come out, but more importantly, the schools are able to showcase their school pride, student ambassadors. They have tables, it's a parade. It's a pretty big deal. And then, I think um, every student known summit, which is again another event where when you're thinking about students elevating their voices and having their own perspectives where they get to talk about their experiences, they get to ask questions of some of the district leaders. Um, in this particular case, you get to see, the influential leaders, the ones who sometimes in the backdrop, you don't know that they're leaders until they kind of stand out, and it just makes a difference. Also, I would say attendance matters campaign. So um, I think we've all experienced post COVID where attendance pretty much has taken a dip. And so tapping into innovation, really trying to think about how can we be creative in working around the average daily attendance as well as chronic absenteeism. And so we offer like campaign funds and those teachers who are working the collaborative referrals or the interventions. We've done yard signs, swag for being schools for being able to kind of showcase on their running screens or marquees and bulletins, etc.
This question comes from a parent. Dr. Gibbs, what will you do to ensure that students' education and safety are number one?
Dr. Brenneman, I would say this is the one thing that certainly will keep me up at night. Safety and security is always top of mind for me, not just for students, but for staff, for families, for the district as a whole. And I understand that that comes with a huge responsibility of, sometimes that can be a city as well as a district thing. But I believe that it starts with wraparound support relationships first. I think is key with key stakeholders. Um, we have to do this together as a city. This is a problem that is bigger than me, than us. So I would certainly like to reach out, expand that opportunity for leaders and us to come together, wrap around supports and removing all barriers. I think classroom management strategies, being able to make sure that if PBIS is the system that we are using, and I think it's really important for us to leverage PBIS the best way. Um, those de-escalation techniques are critically important, and then also utilizing other resources that are required for students to be able to self-regulate. Sometimes I think there is a notion that when students are so dysregulated that they don't need to return back to school or to class. Um, those are exclusionary practices. I do think that students need to be regulated, but there are some techniques that we can use to get them back there instead of always relying on OSS, out of school suspension. Also, would say threat assessments. So, if just following the process, and then that's from a classroom perspective. On the other side, I would say safety and security, having a good comprehensive plan. And so just thinking about some of the things that, we've done that may be just a little different than the way that you all operate here at EPS. But certainly like the points of entry, the camera surveillance, the locked doors, those things are critically important. So today, even when I was on my tours, I was thinking like, oh, the door should be locked. Oh, no, we can't go through this way. But of course, that's just the way that I'm accustomed because I'm looking for those things and I'm pressure testing those every day. I think training and drills, those regular drills and making sure all staff are, principals are conducting those drills, but all staff know their roles and responsibilities. Sometimes just you don't know when it's going to happen, and so it's not what happens to us, but it's how we respond to things. And so we got to practice how we play. Those lockdowns, evaluations, emergency protocols, everyone has to know their role and responsibilities. In the event that we have to pivot, um, when there is a real crisis, and I don't have to tell anyone in this room because you know what that means. Um, I also think the one of the most important things is just the strong relationships with the law enforcement. Um, what I did this week is try to really get a good assessment around the assessments, the updates, the effectiveness of the systems that are already in place. Um, I think it's okay, um, but if we're doing something great, we want to celebrate it. And if we're not, we have to certainly make some mid-course corrections. And then I think the last thing around safety and security that I want to address is certainly just staying abreast of current trends, being able to attend conferences to learn more about the latest technology and the enhancement features.
The last two questions were submitted from parents. Dr. Gibbs, if you are selected, what would be your top focus for our children, and what unique qualities would you bring to our schools?
Sure. Um, I think the first thing that's top of mind is engaging stakeholders with updating the expired strategic plan, for sure. I certainly would like to focus on some of those game changing targets that are outlined in the strategic plan. One has to do with the third grade reading. Third grade reading right now is currently sitting at 23.5% proficiency. Um, and so I think just kind of setting the stage around the curriculum, um, using the guaranteed and viable curriculum. And so I do understand that because it is new, we have to continue to work on um, the implementation of the curriculum, but we also have to make sure that we're having clear expectations. I think the lessons have to be rigorous, um, and there has to be a level of engagement, and that's just at the very basic level. And then also we would be using the multi tiered systems of support given that we have such a unique population of students so that we can kind of work on closing those foundational gaps. So essentially, I want to make sure that we're strengthening the core through standards aligned and grade level task. It's important that the lessons are culturally relevant. Sometimes um, I observe lessons and teachers are talking, but students aren't listening. And so they miss out on the transference. It doesn't stick with them. So when there is a gradual release and students are expected to take an assignment or an assessment, there's a huge disconnect between what has been taught versus what has been learned. So essentially, mastery of learning is critical in this aspect. Um, and then I think, we certainly, if we have to drill down, given that we know that our students have such wide gaps. So that means that it requires some small group instruction, getting to some of those foundational pieces. Um, and then the other target that I would like to address is simply the diploma in hand, uh, which our graduation rate is 72% here in Erie, and the dropout rate is approximately 18%. So, having some very specific strategies that involve several people, progress monitoring, the schedules, credit recovery, dropouts, coding as reported by the state. Um, we can do that. Um, but I also want to think about the unique qualities that the classroom teachers bring. Um, and it's important to have passion and a belief that all students can be a success story, as well as setting the right learning conditions for that to happen.
This last question, again submitted by a parent, Dr. Gibbs. How do you intend to address the learning environment at Erie's Public Schools and to make it more conducive for learning, thus setting students up for success?
Education is the great equalizer. Pulse checks, the only way that you know is if you show up. So, again, leveraging school leadership visibility, I think through informal walk and talks, through cabinet visits, having systems for ensuring that um, students receive a guaranteed, personalized, and applied experience across the tiers, so across elementary, across middle, and high. Again, I think it goes back to the curriculum. The curriculum is a big deal. It can be a pain point if we don't take the time to continue to learn how to implement with integrity. Um, so, again, some of the things that I've mentioned earlier, strengthening the core through that standards aligned approach. I think the MTSS, which is the multi tiered system of supports, all means all. Um, and building those supports so that we are either remediating or accelerating for students. Every student doesn't need to be remediated, but we also have to be intentional in building in um, those strategies for accelerating learning as well. Again, small group lessons. Um, we can't skip this step. I was having a conversation with a very bright principal today, and that is one of the things that she mentioned, that she really wants to make sure that she tightens up on her intervention time. She understands that there's a lot of power in that. So being able to do that in ways not just for some students, but for all students, I think it requires us to be able to progress monitor all kids, but we also have to include our students with disabilities as well as those multilingual students. And then I think at the very least, we can't forget about our wraparound supports. Wraparound supports are a game changer. And so, again, whether that's um, things that students need in removing barriers, or if it's things that they need in terms of they need some one to one time, they need to talk with a counselor, they need to kind of do a check in for mental health. Um, they've had a situation to happen in the community and they just need to be able to learn how to navigate through that. I think all those things are very unique and real to the families and the students that we serve.
Dr. Gibbs, that is the end of the questions that were submitted by the community. I want to give you a chance to say if there's anything else that you'd like to add or you'd like the community to know.
I certainly want to thank you for engaging with me on this evening. It has been an absolute honor. Um, we only had an hour to share snippets of my leadership journey, but I do want to leave you with this. Leadership, in my view, is hard work. It is more than strategy and vision. It's about building authentic and meaningful relationships with students, teachers, families, and the community at large, fostering a foundation of trust and mutual respect. I am eager to immerse myself in the Erie's community in understanding its strengths and needs and collaborating with each of you to building on a thriving educational system where every student reaches their potential. Ultimately, I'm answering to a higher calling to create generational change and a positive impact for the 10,000 plus students, future Erie alumni. I want to partner with you to dismantle an outstanding education, ensuring that Erie schools are safer, more reliable, and predictable places for students to learn and grow. Thank you for this opportunity, and I'm eager to serve as your next superintendent.
Thank you, Dr. Gibbs, and thank you, everyone. I want to provide a few reminders, again, since this is our last finalist interview. First off, again, thank you, everybody who has participated in this 6-month-long process. Of course, we had a series of focus groups, stakeholder interviews, public surveys that took place last October and November. And through the process, the school board developed a profile of what we and who we believed our future superintendent should look like and what they should have as far as their skills and experiences. The 3 candidates that we've chosen as finalists have met or exceeded that profile. And I want to recognize that throughout this process that the board has been focused on those skills and those experiences, and that we've done our best to try to create a system that you, the public, fellow parents, teachers, administrators, key support staff, that you can have faith and trust in the system that we have developed in choosing our next superintendent. I want to thank Dr. Gibbs for caring so much about our district to apply for this important position at this very important time. I want to remind folks that on your screens and also on a variety of the sheets of paper that's out there, and for those who are watching at home, that you can please do leave survey feedback for Dr. Gibbs. It closes at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. The board will receive that survey from all of the candidates, and we will use that in making our decision. I also want to make note that if you are watching the video or trying to share it with other folks, that the live stream starts a bit early, about a half hour early, and our staff will be putting a link in the description box. Usually it's around fast forwarded to 30 minutes into the video. So if others want to see it, you want to share it, let them know that it's about 30 minutes in. Again, I want to thank you all for participating in tonight. I'll be available if there's any questions about the process, the role of the board, and this decision-making process. And I believe Dr. Gibbs will be available for any further discussions or questions you may have as well. So thank you again, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.